Abruptly, he brought the car to a halt when an unexpected black dog emerged, contrasting vividly against the pristine white snow. It darted across the road, blocking his path and showing no intention of yielding. He pressed firmly on the horn before pausing to assess the peculiar circumstances. A peculiar sensation washed over him as he locked eyes with the dog, stirring a profound intuition that it held a message, attempting to communicate something to him. On the frigid morning of February 15th, 2015, Officer Jeff Gonzalez patrolled the tranquil neighborhood of Autumn Ridge, Wisconsin. As he traversed the snow-laden streets, an extraordinary sight halted his steps. Towering drifts encased the area, and an eerie silence enveloped the surroundings, yet he sensed he was not alone. A canine companion suddenly materialized, trotting alongside him for a brief stretch. While Jeff felt a tinge of concern for the dog, the situation took a sinister twist. The Labrador Retriever seemed to be in search of someone. The biting wind outside rendered it an inhospitable place for any being, whether animal or human, to be exposed to. Prompted by his instincts, the officer resolved to delve deeper into the matter. A disquieting sensation churned in Officer Gonzalez's gut. There was more to the dog's aimless dash along the road. Drawing nearer, he discerned the peculiarity of his movements. The dog would rush toward the road, barking frenziedly for a few paces, only to abruptly halt, scan the surroundings, and dart back in the opposite direction. Intrigued, Jeff parked his car and cautiously approached the enigmatic canine. Although his training had prepared him for any situation, nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. His boots crunched in the snow as he approached from behind, and suddenly the dog turned. He was able to catch the flash of metal name tag on his collar, but before he could grab the dog, it was off again. Getting back in his car, the officer decided to try a different tactic. He wound his window down and drove alongside the dog as it sprinted up and down the road. Suddenly the dog noticed he was being followed, and he stopped dead in his tracks. He raised his head to look at the officer and said, absolutely still, tail wagging. Thinking his plan had worked, Gonzalez opened the door carefully and tried to approach the dog, but the same thing happened. As soon as his boots hit the ground, the dog took off running. Gonzalez had no hope of catching him, so he got back in his car and drove after him, but the dog was not going to be caught so easily. The officer had sworn to protect and serve the community, and to him that included its four-legged friends. But what he didn't know was that the black lab alone in the snow that day wasn't the only one who needed saving. If only he had listened to his instincts sooner. If only he could have known what the frantic dog had been trying to tell him. As he crested the rise, he noticed that he couldn't see the dog. But where had he gone? His eyes moved from one side of the snow-covered pavement to the other, but the black dog was nowhere. Suddenly he saw its outline in his headlights as he slammed on the brakes and swerved. His wheels screeched, and he shuddered on the icy road, but the dog hadn't moved. It was sitting in the middle of the road, motionless. An eerie sight, a lonely black dog sitting silently in his headlights as the snow fell gently all around it. The officer, shaken, paused for a second as the dog raised his head and looked directly into his eyes. They shared a strange, silent moment, and then he knew, as if understanding that the man finally understood what it wanted. The dog started to walk again, looking back over his shoulder every few paces, beckoning the officer to follow him with his amber eyes. Gonzalez drove behind the dog until they rounded the bend into a driveway in the county line road when he was met with a sight that turned his blood to ice in his veins. From a distance, Officer Gonzalez could make out somebody sitting on the porch, but there was something off about the way the body slumped over, motionless. He wasted no time wondering what had happened and rushed over. Fearing the worst, he touched the woman's skin, and it was icy cold. Was he too late? The woman's lips were blue, and she had been out in the cold for a while. Gonzalez pulled her collar aside and searched for a pulse, but found none. Then he felt a small quiver beneath the woman's skin. Faint, but it was there, the weakest of pulses. Realizing that the woman was still alive, he dashed back to his squad car and radioed for help, all too aware that time was running out. Backup arrived shortly afterward, and Officer Gonzalez was able to move the freezing woman into the house. They managed to find ID and discovered that the woman's name was Crystal Went while they waited for the ambulance. They knew they had to call her next kin Tyan. It was a call they wished they didn't have to make. Tyan picked up the phone and was startled to hear the officer. Gonzalez quickly explained that her mother was in critical condition, but help was on the way. When Gonzalez explained what had happened, he thought it was too late. She was overcome with tears and she broke down, but agreed to get to the hospital as soon as she could. She arrived at the hospital where Crystal had been taken with her stricken aunt in tow, but they could only wait to hear about their beloved mother and sister. The minutes ticked by and they waited, but it seemed like an eternity before the doctors appeared. The first thing the doctor told him was that, thankfully, she had been saved just in time. According to the doctor, it was revealed that Crystal had lapsed into unconsciousness due to an unknown heart condition. She had been entirely oblivious to its existence. The doctor determined that she had remained unconscious for nearly an hour before Officer Gonzalez fortuitously discovered her just in the nick of time. He expressed that had he not come across her, the outcome could have been dire. However, Officer Gonzalez humbly acknowledged that credit was due elsewhere. At this point, Officer Gonzalez shared, "I have to believe that he pointed me in the right direction." The enigmatic black lab who had come to Crystal's aid was named John Boy. Without his assistance, Crystal's chances of survival would have been slim. Evidently, John Boy harbored a deep affection for his owner and instinctively recognized the need to seek help from a police officer. John Boy's presence in Crystal's life had not always been a certainty. Before being adopted by Crystal, he had experienced the disappointment of 3 failed adoptions. Rejected and returned to the shelter multiple times, his journey led him to finally find solace with Crystal. Tyan Went, Crystal's daughter, attested to John Boy's unwavering loyalty, affirming that he harbored a profound protectiveness toward her mother. Tyan firmly believed that their paths had crossed for a purpose, a sentiment reinforced by the remarkable story that captivated the nation when it aired on television. As Crystal recuperated in the hospital and underwent further examinations, her condition remained stable. Tyan had a heartfelt message from her mother for Officer Gonzalez. Overwhelmed with gratitude, she embraced the officer, tears streaming down her face. Tyan knew that were it not for Officer Gonzalez's swift actions that fateful day, her mother might not have been here to share her tale. Likewise, without the unwavering devotion of the loyal canine John Boy, Gonzalez may never have located Crystal in time.